Hey, Cedric here. What's up, everyone? Hope you're having a great day. I wanted to make the first video on my channel be a 2020 election prediction. Wanted to kind of go through state by state, at least the battleground states, and kind of explain my reasoning for why I think Biden will win one or why I think Trump will win the other. I think a lot of the polling is wrong. I think the Biden support is probably 3 to 5% higher in a lot of the polls, and some of the polls are just total junk. Like there was an ABC poll in Wisconsin, I believe, that said Biden was up by 17 points, which is just absurd, especially when you compare it to what happened in 2016. And I know things are a little different now, but there's some similarities. And one of the similarities is that there is a hidden Trump vote. So I'm going to start with the Real Clear Politics electoral map. And they started out with 216 for Biden, and those are counting the states that they say aren't toss-ups. And then with Trump, they're starting out at 125. The toss-up states are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin. So I'm just going to kind of go through and make my own electoral map based on what I think is going to happen. And it'll be fun to see what actually happens. Before I start with each state, I'm going to kind of go through my general reasoning on why and on what I think about the polling. One of the things is I think the polling is significantly off. It was significantly off in 2016 because of a hidden Trump voter effect. People don't want to say that they're Trump supporters, and they don't trust pollsters. And in 2016, everybody was wrong. Nate Silvers was predicting that Hillary would win by 90%, something like that, giving her a 90% chance. All the media was saying the same thing. And what happened was they failed to account for the hidden Trump voter. So whatever the polling is, you can assume that it's off by a certain amount. And in 2016, it ranged in the battleground states, it ranged from 2 to 7% off. As an example, in Florida, it was off by about 2.4%. In Florida, the Real Clear Politics average had Hillary, the polling average had Hillary up by 1.2. Trump ended up winning by 1.2. So there was a 2.4% gap in the polling in Florida. And I could go through every state, and there's a certain gap in every state. In Iowa, the Real Clear Politics average did have Trump up. They had him up by 2.4%. He ended up winning by 9.5%. So the polling was off by 7.1%. This year, the Real Clear Politics average has Biden up by 1%. If we said it was the same percentage as in 2016, that would still end up putting Trump would be ahead in Iowa by 6%. So in that particular example, I don't have to look into it too much. I think Trump is probably going to win Iowa, even though Biden's ahead in the polling. But there's also other factors. There's the hidden Trump vote. There's also the Hispanic non-white vote that I think is going to play a major role in this election. I think the black vote and non-white, but also non-black vote, Hispanic, other races is going to play a role. I think in 2016, Trump won, I think it was about 12% of the black vote. And in Rasmussen polling, which Rasmussen ended up being one of the most accurate polling companies in 2016, it was Rasmussen and Trafalgar Group. Their polling was pretty accurate, and part of their models, they try and account for the hidden Trump vote. So in all of these states, when I'm making my predictions, I'm taking into account the hidden Trump vote. I'm also taking into account that more black people and more non-whites other than black will be voting for Trump, especially Hispanic. The approval rating is about 50%, somewhere in there, which is much greater than it was in 2016. And I think it's about 40% are saying that they're going to vote for Trump, 45%. And then the black vote, of the polled people, according to Rasmussen and Trafalgar, is finding similar metrics. About 30% are saying that they're voting for Trump versus about 12% that voted for Trump in 2016. And I think there's a lot of different factors that play into that. So there's been a significant uptick in the amount of black support. And then you have people like Ice Cube, Kanye West that have endorsed Trump. I think that's going to have an impact. And when you look at states and what percentage of other races they have, like Florida has a large Hispanic population, Michigan has a large black population. Polling companies like Trafalgar Group try and account for that, and I think they're doing a pretty good job. Now, some of their estimates are significantly different than the Real Clear Politics average. As an example, in Michigan, Trafalgar Group is putting Trump ahead by 2%. The Real Clear Politics average for Michigan is Biden up by 6.5%. So there's a 8.5% difference between what Trafalgar Group is saying and what the Real Clear Politics average is saying. Being from Michigan, I tend to side with Trafalgar Group on Michigan because when I'm out and about, I see the number of Trump signs and I see the enthusiasm for Trump, and I don't see Biden except for a few select areas like Ann Arbor and some of the it is more populated areas, but I don't see that much enthusiasm. When Biden and Obama come to Michigan, nobody shows up. When Trump comes to Michigan, it's massive rallies. And that's another factor that I'm looking at too, the enthusiasm for Biden versus Trump. When Biden shows up, you have 30 people. When Trump shows up, you have 30,000 people. And that's why I thought Obama would win in 2008. And I thought that pretty early on because he was drawing the crowds. You have to have a certain charisma to win, and Biden just doesn't have it. So the candidate is highly flawed. And Kamala doesn't really have it either. She's always nervous when she talks. She has that really nervous laugh. There's just not any charisma there, in my opinion. I mean, some people may think different, but all of those come into play. So with all that being said, I'm going to kind of make my predictions on the toss-up states, and I'll start with Nevada. Looking at Nevada, Hillary Clinton won that in 2016 by 2.4. Biden, Real Clear Politics average is up 4 points. And then in 2012, Obama won by 6.7. In 2008, he won by 12.5. Been trending towards Republicans, but I think on this one, my prediction will be it's going to be leaning Democrat. Next state down is Florida, and in 2008 Obama won it by 2.8, in 2012 by 0.9, and then in 2016 Trump won it by 1.2, even though the Real Clear Politics average had Clinton up by 1.2, so there's a 2.4 difference. Now Biden is up by 1.2. I think Trump is going to win Florida, especially when you take into account the increase in a Hispanic vote that I think is going to happen when you double. I think there's going to be double the Hispanic vote in Florida for Trump. When you double that segment of the population, I think it's going to be enough to put Trump over the edge. And when you look at the early polling or the early voting numbers for the mail-in and early voting, in-person early voting, there's a website Joe has done, .github.io. He does a very in-depth analysis of it, but Trump is significantly favored in that based on a comparison with the last year's data. So I'm going to call Florida for Trump in my prediction. Next one up is Georgia. Georgia's an interesting one. Real Clear Politics average is predicting 0.4 in favor of Biden. In 2016, Trump won Georgia by 5%, and then it was Romney and McCain. I think Georgia has a pretty significant black population. I think they're going to vote for Trump, and I think it's going to be a higher percentage. So in my prediction, I'm going to say Georgia is leaning Republican. So next one up is Iowa. Trump won Iowa by 9.5%. They have Biden up by 1%. And the Real Clear Politics average in Iowa was way off. So I'm just going to call that for Trump. I think that's a pretty easy one in my opinion. Michigan is kind of going to be based on a gut feeling, but it's also the fact that the polling was significantly off in 2016. It was off by 5% or more, 5.1%. Even though they have Biden up by 6.5 in the Real Clear Politics average. I don't buy it. I see the enthusiasm in Michigan. Michigan also has a significant black population. So I think Michigan is going to go Trump. I'll probably have more people disagree with that one than any of them. And then Minnesota, Biden's up by 4.7. Clinton won it in 2016 by 1.5. The Real Clear Politics had her up by 6. So they were off about 4.5. It's going to be very close in Minnesota, in my opinion, but I think Biden's going to take that one. So I'm going to change that to leaning Democrat. So next up is North Carolina. North Carolina is a tricky one. Trump did win it by 3.7% in 2016. The Real Clear Politics average did have him up, but they had him up by 0.8. So he outperformed by 3%. And now Biden is up by 0.6. Some of the early voting numbers look like they're going to be pretty close. With that being said, I think there is still, 3 to 5% hidden Trump vote in these polls. And with what Trafalgar Group has, I am going to call North Carolina for Trump. Then there's Ohio. They have that as a tie. Trump won Ohio by 8%. I don't even think Ohio is really contested. Ohio, to me, is strongly leaning Republican. And then Texas, Trump won Texas by 9%. The polls had Trump up by 10.8%. Now the Real Clear Politics average has Trump up by 2.3%. Looks pretty close. The demographics in Texas are changing. There is a significant Hispanic population. So because of that, I am going to say that Texas is leaning Republican. That gets Trump over 274, but there's Pennsylvania left and Wisconsin. Those are two pretty hard ones for me. It's kind of a toss-up. Trump barely won Pennsylvania. Trump barely won Wisconsin. Biden is polling better than Clinton did in both of the states. So I'm going to say both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are going to be leaning Democrat. And I'm going to say that it will be there's the Maine one. There's Maine and Nebraska, I think. But it doesn't really matter. I'm going to say that there's 262 Biden to 274 Trump is going to be my prediction for the election. We'll see what happens, but I just wanted to make that prediction, and that's going to be my first video on the channel, so we'll see what happens.